talk a little bit about the injury on my hand. And this is serious talk about shop safety in general. And it's also going to end up being kind of graphic. So if this is stuff that upsets you, you probably shouldn't watch this video, because we're going to show some pictures of the injury, and I'm going to talk about what happened and how it happened. And so just want to be serious about that. This is going to be something it's kind of gross. Okay. The amount of time that I've worked with big shop equipment throughout my life is extensive, and the fact that I made it this far without a serious injury is, amazing. The other side of that, I had to make up for it when I finally got an injury. It was a doozy. So how the injury happened was a couple of mistakes, a series of mistakes on my part, which injuries like this usually do. So about a week before this had happened, I needed to cut something on my table saw that was very large, and so I raised the blade way up out of the table to make that cut. And I didn't return the blade to its normal position, so there was mistake number one. Obviously, my hand doesn't belong anywhere near the saw when it's running, and so obviously that's a big mistake there too. The biggest mistake was I was wearing gloves. Okay? And so I had something small I was just going to trim real quick, and I didn't take the gloves off. The saw caught the edge of the glove and pulled my hand into the saw and laid it open pretty good. Went across the palm, went around the index finger, took a pretty good size hunk out of the thumb. So the cuts were across there. This was a complete glove prior to this. So right out across, right around there, took a hunk out of the thumb. And this was pretty serious. Okay, so we're going to show you some pictures next of the actual injury from when this happened.
So this is what the hand looked like, and right after the injury. So you can kind of see the cut down here. It's a little covered up. This gives you a good idea what the finger itself looked like. You can see the hunk taken out of the thumb. This one might be a little better, so you can kind of see this cut right here. Luckily, only sort of went through meat. It didn't cut any of the tendons or anything to that finger, so they could just clean that up and stitch it. These cuts were fairly superficial. You can kind of see the piece of tissue missing from the thumb, but obviously the biggest injury was to that finger right there. So this is kind of what it looked like after sitting for a little bit. You get a little better view of where the damaged tissue was. These are pretty superficial. This was deep, but didn't hit anything. This was the biggest problem right here, because the cut was all the way down to the bone.
So after having the injury, the closest hospital to me was up the road, Marshall Hospital. And so I went there to emergency to have them look at the injury. Funny story. I'd wrapped the hand up in paper towel because it's what I had to keep from bleeding all over the place. And so I've got the thumb holding the paper towel in place, and I drove myself to emergency. Yes, lots of people will get mad at me for that. So I walk into emergency, and you have a pulse in your thumb, so I'm kind of squirting blood out of the thumb. And they go, "Oh, you cut your thumb." It's like, I am so not here for the thumb, right? So we unwrapped it to take a look at it and whatnot. And so they cleaned everything up. Could tell that I had, in fact, cut the tendons in the finger, and was going to require surgery that hospital wasn't prepared and set up to do. So they transferred me from there to UC Davis in downtown Sacramento because they're more of an expert in the area for this particular type of surgery. And so they did emergency surgery on the finger to reattach the nerves, the blood vessels, and the tendons. Now, you have basically The blood vessels and nerves are kind of in a U shape around the finger, and it cut through everything. All of this was disconnected. So they were able to restore blood flow on one side only, so I've got kind of a reduction in blood flow. They reattach the nerves, but it just takes forever for nervous tissue to regrow, so the finger itself is still numb at this point. The tendon, unfortunately, is a much harder repair to do. So if it was a nice, clean, straight cut, like from a knife, then you have nice square edges that you can stitch back together, and the chances of repairing that and having the repair be successful are higher. Violent cuts like chainsaws, table saws, things like that, it's not a nice clean cut. It's all frayed, and it's harder to get things to stitch together. And unfortunately, in my case, for that surgery, the repair failed and it separated.
Alright, so this is what I woke up to after that first surgery. So the hand's all wrapped up. It's hard to see here. There's actually a fiberglass cast piece on the back side of my hand that index finger is essentially attached to keep any of this from moving. So I was in this for, I don't know, a week, maybe a little longer, before I went in to have these all taken off. And so this is the first unwrapping of that hand after that first surgery. So you can still see I've got the stitches in all of this stuff. They'd actually just cauterized that hunk taken out of the thumb. So didn't have any stitches. There wasn't anything to stitch up there. There's stitches here, and then there's some stitch work underneath all of this here. So when we pull all that off and take a look at it, like I said, you can see the stitches, that lower piece here. So the original cut was kind of around like this. This cut here is where they had to open up the finger more to try to get in there to repair the damage. And this area here, there just really wasn't any skin to work with, and so essentially I had to sort of regrow skin in this area right here. This is essentially what it looks like right when they first pulled this off and started cleaning it up a little bit. So then I start doing, say, wrap it up like this, and so this is me when I'm going to start doing physical therapy. So now instead of that fiberglass cast in the back, I've got this big plastic paddle on the back that's to try to keep the finger from extending too far, which can rip the repair. I'll give you a good idea how much that tissue swelled up in that finger. It was decidedly unhappy to have had surgery. And this is what that finger looked like about 3 weeks after surgery. So you can kind of see the area where I had to regrow skin is still healing. And it was about this point in time when they realized that the surgery repair itself might not have been successful, because I really had no motion in that finger, and they would have expected me to have some measure of movement in the finger at that time.
With the failure of the repair on the tendon, eventually I had to get an MRI to confirm that this had separated. One of the problems is when the tendon separates and then it pulls out of the path that the tendon is supposed to slide through. Well, all of that was cut. So it essentially heals over as a solid piece. There's no way for them to put a tendon back in place. So the next surgery I had was to try to repair the path that the tendon needs to slide through. And what they did is they took a tendon out of my forearm, and they used that to rebuild the path that the tendon has to slide through. And if you were upset by any of the previous photos, the next one is probably one you don't want to look at.
Alright, so this is on the forearm right here where they had to pull out a piece of one of the tendons in my forearm to use as material to rebuild the path for the tendon. And this is where it gets gross. Okay, so this is my finger laid open. So this is one of the shot from the actual surgery. So this cross stitching you see in here, this is the tendon that they took out of my forearm that they're using to rebuild the path that the tendon would go through. And this white thing that you see in here is a piece of silicone to keep that pathway open. So that's the path the tendon is supposed to slide through, and then this is rebuilding that path out of my own tissue from the tendon in my forearm. And so the silicone was cool because it bends. It's kind of like a thick rubber band, so that I could keep the finger moving while this was healing, to keep the joints supple and to allow it to heal correctly. So after surgery, this is what it looked like all stitched up. The surgeon was really good in the way he could stitch this stuff up, and I mean, it's considering how nasty all this looked, I ended up with very little scar tissue out of it. He tried to follow the same path of where they had cut to go in before, even when he had to open up all the way the whole rest of the finger. And this is kind of what it looked like, like a week after surgery here. You can see this is the area here where they took that tendon out of my forearm, and then this is where they went in there to rebuild that path system, the sheaths and pulleys for that tendon to slide through. Now at this point in time, I'm just healing from all this surgery damage. There isn't a tendon attached in here. So right now, where the muscles for your hand are in your forearm, and the tendon slides up to pull that finger down. Well, right now all that tendon is basically balled up inside the palm of my hand, waiting for this to heal so they could reattach the tendon to that finger.
So once they did the reconstruction of the path for the tendon, at this stage, all of this just needs to heal. So although the finger no longer has a tendon attached, there's no way I can use it, I had to spend several months with this all healing before they could move forward. And this is when BattleBots was supposed to be filming. So the original plan was for me to complete the robot, be ready to go film BattleBots, then once BattleBots was completed, then finish the next surgery on the hand. Unfortunately, delays that were out of BattleBots' control happened, and the dates for filming just kept sliding and moved to a point where it was late enough in the year that I could not put the surgery off any further. And so this is the sad part from all of this. I'm not going to be able to compete at BattleBots this year because of these injuries. So the surgery on my hand to do the repair to the tendon happened in September, and BattleBots is filming in October. That's just how things ended up. And so the next piece was to reattach a tendon.
Okay, so this is what I woke up to for surgery number 3. Again, with the fiberglass piece across the back to keep motion down, everything all wrapped up. So, sadly, I'm getting used to having my arm wrapped up like that. So this is the first time we take this off to take a look at the handiwork here. Alright, so if you remember before, there was that silicone piece in there. They were going to have to cut here and here so they could attach the tendon here, and then they could just pull that silicone piece out and draw the tendon through where they're going to reattach it. So this stuff down here, this is kind of complicated. So each of your fingers actually has 2 tendons in it. One that attaches in the middle knuckle, and one that attaches all the way out at the end, the last knuckle. And in this type of surgical repair, I end up with just one attached out to the end, not 2. And so in order to get a long enough piece to go out there to attach it, they actually stitch those two tendons together. And when it comes time to do this final repair surgery, they got to go down in the forearm and clip where one of them attaches there. So now they have a longer piece to drag up through to reattach. So this is still just harvesting tendon material out of my forearm to use to attach to that finger. But as this is kind of what it looks like with everything off. At this point you could see so all the stitches are still in place and all of his marks and whatnot. But it's funny with all of this going on here. Really very little pain involved with all of this. This actually went fairly smoothly and easily. So far anyway.
So where does that leave me now today? The surgery to reattach a tendon has been successful. So I'm going through physical therapy right now, and things are healing as well as they can be expected. So here's the hand as it sits today. These are the areas where they had to cut the tendon that they were reattaching to the finger. Here's where they had to go back in to pull it up through the new path to attach. The tendon's attached out to the end, to this here, and for the first time in a year, I can wiggle that finger. So this is major improvement. So where we sit today is I'm going through physical therapy week by week, continuing to get some improvement to the use of the hand. I have to be really careful with it, so I certainly can't be lifting anything heavy or doing anything like that for possible risk of pulling any of the repairs. So I've got about another 2.5 months or so before I'm going to have clearance from the doctor to actually be lifting anything with the hand. But as it sits right now, everything is progressing well, and I fully believe that I'll be, this won't limit me down the road. I'll continue to build robots and continue to do the things that I want to do.